Our history as humans is loaded with unending facts. However, more than the names of great men and the dates of unforgettable happenings that you know is a wide range of historical facts that you were never taught in school.
Mr. Grimes did not have a happy time of the week.
So, stay with us as we bring to you 20 historical facts you didn't know. Number 20. Columbus didn't discover America. Most likely you have been told that Columbus was the one that discovered America. You might just want to erase that from your memory after this video. And if you need something to replace that information, here's what happened. Columbus indeed had 4 different trips while exploring places, which started in 1492. He landed on various Caribbean islands that are now the Bahamas, as well as the island later called Hispaniola. He didn't stop there. He also explored the Central and South American coasts. But if there's a place Columbus never touched, it is North America, which of course was already inhabited by Native Americans, so he never thought he had found a new continent. Also, it is believed that Norse explorer Leif Erikson reached Canada about 500 years before Columbus was born, and some believe that Phoenician sailors crossed the Atlantic much earlier than that. So, who on earth discovered America? There are different theories to answer that question, but what we know is that Vikings were in America centuries before Columbus got there. And there is also evidence, though disputed, that Polynesian explorer also visited the continent before the Spaniards. Technically, nomadic Asian tribes first discovered America over 15,000 years ago. Number 19. Athletes in the ancient Olympics performed naked. Just imagine sitting down with your family and watching a group of naked men jumping and running on the track. Cringe. Well, the Olympic Games were played in the nude before you knew it. In the past, the naked male body was believed to be an important symbol for the Greeks, and the arena of the Olympics, which was only open to men, was no exception. The athletic body signifies civilization and also Greek domination, as the track games were not always played nude. Olympic Games were first celebrated in 776 BC, but at the time, the athletes never contested naked. However, in 720 BC, athletes began to compete butt naked. Although no one is sure why it started, there's a famous story about it. The first athlete to compete naked was Orsippus, a runner from Megara. While he was running a foot race, his loincloth accidentally fell. It appeared that Orsippus ran faster naked, and so, since then, athletes decided to throw away their clothes and do it the birth suit way. Most likely someone had to bring them back to their senses, so we didn't get to witness it. Thank goodness. Number 18. The Eiffel Tower was saved. No doubt we all adore the Eiffel Tower so much that it is a major highlight of every trip to Paris. But did you know that this beauty was going to be destroyed? The agreement was that the Eiffel Tower, built for the 1889 Universal Exposition in Paris, would be destroyed after 20 years of use. But Gustave Eiffel, the man who designed the tower, could not imagine having his beautiful work destroyed, so he specified its purpose. Gustave stated that it would be used for meteorological and astronomical observations, physics experiments, a strategic vantage point, an optical telegraph communications point, and a beacon for electric lighting and wind studies. And indeed, that was the saving grace the tower needed. From 1899, the tower was put into use, and Gustave Eiffel set himself an office on the 3rd floor to make astronomical and physiological observations. Soon, he installed a meteorology laboratory on the 3rd floor. He also had a passion for aerodynamics, and so he carried out a series of observations on gravity. Additionally, Gustave Eiffel encouraged numerous scientific experiments on the tower, including Foucault's pendulum, the mercury pressure gauge, physiological studies, and radio contact. In the end, this beautiful structure was saved for us all. Number 17. The government once poisoned alcohol during Prohibition. Yeah, you heard right, and you're probably wondering why that happened. It all started on the Christmas Eve of 1926, when a man suddenly rushed into Bellevue Hospital in New York as if he was being chased by something. And of course, he claimed he was being chased by a baseball bat-wielding Santa Claus. Before the hospital staff could find out the man was hallucinating and also the cause of his hallucination, he had already died. Soon, another partygoer died after having the same symptom, and after that was another. Before Christmas Eve ended, the hospital staff tallied up more than 60 people who were desperately ill and soon found out it was all caused by alcohol. More people died, and within the next 2 days, yet another 23 people died in the city from celebrating the season. That called for a serious investigation on how the alcohol consumed was produced, and to everyone's surprise, it was the city's Christmas gift courtesy of the U.S. government. The government had deliberately poisoned the manufactured alcohol in the U.S. because people continued to consume so much alcohol even after it was banned. The idea was to scare people into giving up illicit drinking, but instead of scaring them, it killed a lot of people, at least 10,000 of them. Scary. Number 16. France built fake Paris. We are back in Paris. But this time, the fake Paris. France once built a fake Paris during World War I to save itself. While other countries thought of getting better weapons to fight their enemy, France thought of trucking theirs. They planned to build a fake Paris to trick German bomber pilots into bombing a different place, thinking they had bombed Paris. The idea came after the Germans bombed Paris in 1914 and 1917, and it began to be floated. To achieve this, the lights in the real Paris were turned off at night, and dim lights were used in the construction of fake Paris to make it seem like people were trying but failing to keep themselves undetected in the dark. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the fake Paris was never actually completely constructed as the war ended in 1918. The fake city was meant to have 3 zones, but only one was ever constructed. And in the only one constructed, artists painted fake neighborhoods, installed streetlights, and made a wooden train to move along tracks as though it was real. That was a big waste, but an amazing idea. Number 15. Henry Ford didn't invent the first car. Till today, a lot of people would say Henry Ford made the first car, but that's not true. What Ford did was bring the car to the people. He did not invent the car. So if he didn't, who did? Most historians credit Germany's Karl Benz with inventing the automobile, though several people had been working on self-propelled vehicles around the same time. Benz, whose namesake car company, Mercedes-Benz, builds ultra-luxury cars that bear little resemblance to the original cars Benz himself worked on, developed a gasoline-powered 3-wheeled vehicle in 1885. By 1889, Benz had a working commercial vehicle, the Model 3, which he exhibited at the Paris World's Fair. While Ford didn't invent the car, he was also falsely credited with innovating the assembly line. If Ford didn't invent the car, or the assembly line, what exactly did he do to deserve the credit all these years? Well, he did something really important. He combined assembly line manufacturing and car building. Impressive, don't you think? Number 14. Food was eaten while reclining. When you were young, you must have been told a few times never to eat while reclining or standing, as it might be dangerous. It seems the ancient Greeks have a different belief about that. Images on countless works of art, including pottery, frescoes, wine cups, and sculptures, have all depicted ancient Greeks reclining on one side to eat and drink. This habit began at least as early as the 7th century BC and was later picked up by the Romans. Strange, right? Even more strange is the fact that Greeks are always pictured lying on their left side but never their right. It is not clear why they choose their left, but some historians argue that lying on this particular side leaves the right hand free to grasp vessels used to eat and drink. But we can't go with that because some images are showing Greeks reclining on their left side and still using their left hand to eat and drink. So, why? Well, whatever the reason is, it must have been very comfortable for them. Number 13. The first face on $1 note. Let's assume you are being asked to state the name of the person whose face was the first to appear in the $1 note. What would your answer be? Without thinking about it, it's probably George Washington, but sorry to shock you, that's wrong. Let's go back to how it all started. Although paper currency has been around for centuries, the practice was first used in the Western world around the 17th century. During the colonial era, physical money was quite scarce in the American colonies. Instead, the economy operated on a barter system using goods as payment for services. With the advent of the American Revolution, the Continental Congress began issuing paper money to help fund the war effort, but the bills were not worth much and depreciated quickly. Up until the Civil War, there were around 10,000 different kinds of paper money in circulation in the United States. Thus, throughout the early years of our country, foreign money and bartering were still widely used. During the Civil War, the United States government funded its war effort by printing new forms of currency. It was at this time that the first official paper currency was created. The federal government even printed fractional notes during the time because the metal normally used to make coins was needed for the war. One of the bills created at the time was the official $1 bill in 1862. This early version of the bill featured then Secretary of the Treasury, Salmon Chase. For emphasis' sake, The first face to appear on the $1 bill was Salmon Chase. It remained there until the Civil War ended and the U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing took over the production of the U.S. currency. And in 1869, George Washington's face was printed on the $1 bill. Number 12. Olympics awarded medals for exquisite arts. For the second time, we're opening the books of history for the sake of the Olympics. What you probably know the Olympics for is track and field events. But did you know that even artists got medals at the Olympics in the past? For the first 4 decades of competition, the Olympics awarded official medals for painting, sculpture, architecture, literature, and music, alongside those for the athletic competitions. From 1912 to 1952, juries awarded a total of 151 medals to original works in the fine arts inspired by athletic endeavors. But in 1954, the juried art competitions were abandoned because artists were considered to be professionals, while the athletes were required to be amateurs. It is long forgotten that if you ask many people today, only a few would know that the Olympics awarded medals for exquisite art in the past. Number 11. First high heels were not for women. Today we see men who wear high heels as different, and we think they are trying to imitate the women because you rarely see men in heels. But the truth is, the first heels ever were not made for women. The earliest known example of high heels comes from ancient Iran in the 10th century CE. At that time, Iran was known as Persia, and so the Persian army had the honor of wearing the first high heels. The Persians were excellent horsemen, and the cavalry formed an important part of the Persian army. The horseback soldiers would charge towards the enemy standing up in the saddle to fire a bow. Firing a bow from a charging horse is no child's play. It took a great amount of skill and a little help from some clever footwear. Yes, footwear is important, which is why the Persian archers wore high heels. Okay, not the stiletto heels, but a heel too high for men of this age. The Persians had rather ingeniously worked out that a longer heel helped their feet stay in the stirrups when they stood up to fire their bows. Even after a millennial has passed, it is still in use today. It's why cowboy boots and riding boots have a block heel. So when did women start to wear heels? In the 12th century, CE, high heels made their way to India, and a female dancer in the Ramappa temple was one of the first women to rock them. Number 10. Alexander the Great was accidentally buried alive. This topic must sound like a lie right now. It must make you wonder how a person can be buried accidentally. You must know Alexander III of Macedon, commonly known as Alexander the Great. If you don't, he was a king of the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedon. He accomplished so much early in life, which is why his name appears many times in great books. But unfortunately, he died at age 32. According to some historians, Alexander died of malaria or other natural causes, and some say he was poisoned. But new theories have suggested that Alexander might have been alive when he was buried. In 323 BC, Alexander fell ill, and after 12 days of excruciating pain, he seemingly passed away. But the most surprising fact about his death is the fact that his corpse didn't show any signs of rot or decomposition for a whole 6 days. According to modern scientists, Alexander suffered from the neurological disorder Guillain-Barré syndrome, a syndrome that makes a person paralyzed but leaves them mentally aware. If that was the case, then Alexander was buried alive due to ignorance. What a bad way to live his last days. Number 9. Baseball's true origins. Lovers of baseball, are you even sure of the origin of your favorite game? For years, most people believe that a man named Abner Doubleday invented baseball in Cooperstown, New York in 1839. That's because until not too long ago, there was a sign there right next to the Hall of Fame saying the same thing. Well, if you believe Abner Doubleday invented the game known as baseball in Cooperstown, New York, then you have believed a lie to be your truth. Not only is that story untrue, but it's also not even in the ballpark. Baseball's real origins date back way further, to at least the 18th century. The first widely accepted lie about baseball being a truly American sport revolved around Alexander Cartwright. Alexander founded and led the Knickerbocker Baseball Club in New York, and 1845 he was credited with writing down the first rules of baseball. Yes, he wrote down some rules, and his club played some famous baseball games. It was discovered that his rules were derived from a novel titled Game of Town Ball. While the origin of the game can't be traced, we do know that it started in the 18th century, which negates the historical fact that says Abner Doubleday invented it in 1839. Number 8. Ketchup was once a medicine. Wherever you see ketchup, The only thing that comes to mind is good because you have eaten ketchup with food all your life. But don't let that sweet taste fool you. It was once a medicine. A long time ago, ketchup was a concoction of fish mushrooms, but in 1834, Dr. John Cook Bennett added tomatoes to the mixture. He claimed the recipe as medicinal and could cure diarrhea, indigestion, jaundice, and rheumatism. We can't actually say ketchup is not a medicine because the addition of tomato to the mix meant it added a plethora of vitamins and antioxidants to the sauce. Dr. John further had pill salesman Archibald Miles make his sauce into an extract of tomato pills. And once the pills hit the market, brigades of copycats began selling their tomato-based pills. It would have been good if they did the exact thing, but they did something extremely bad. They simply sold laxatives with no trace of tomatoes and also made wild claims that their pills could cure everything from scurvy to mending bones. Because of these false claims, the medicine business collapsed in 1850. Number 7. How knights used the toilet. As you must know, there is no knight without armor, whether it is shiny or not. But have you ever wondered how your knight in shiny armor uses the toilet while in his armor? The main purpose of the armor is to make it difficult to kill the knight. Or maybe it has a plan to kill him too, because how is he supposed to relieve himself when nature calls? There are different types of armor, but let's assume a knight is wearing plate armor, which is a lot more complex to put on. He would probably need to squat. To do that, several pieces of armor had to be removed or lifted before he could drop his pants, which made going to the bathroom in full plate armor a more time-consuming affair. Only in very rare suits of armor, which were purely used for jousting, the buttocks and groin were covered by plates, which made it impossible to go to the toilet without first getting out of the armor. So, if defecation was this big of a task for knights, how on earth did they act their human selves in the battleground? There was no time to remove their armor, which brings us to just one option. They did it in their armor. Number 6. Forks were considered a sacrilege. While forks are relatively new inventions, the first forks were used in ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome. But it seems the first time the fork came, it was not well received. At first, it was used as a cooking tool until the Middle Age, when a smaller version was used for eating by wealthy families of the Middle East and Byzantine Empire, only to be considered a sacrilege at the time. Yeah, you probably screamed, "What the fork?" But it actually happened. Forks were seen as an offense to God, and it's all because they were believed to be artificial hands, and as such considered to be sacrilegious. For the West, it started in the 11th century when a Byzantine princess scandalized the court by bringing forks to her new husband's Venetian household. Forks were considered a sacrilege, and quite rude after all. God had given us natural forks, our fingers. Well, if you ask me, forks actually look like tiny fingers. What do you think? Now it's time for today's subscriber's pick. This picture shows a woman laying down on the bare floor and outside. She seems to be calm, enjoying the breeze, and not in a rush to leave. Or there's a particular place where people still go about naked. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Number 5. Thomas Edison didn't invent the electric bulb. If the electric bulb has ever saved your night or day, you must have praised its inventor. Thomas Alva Edison? Oh, scratch that. He didn't even invent the electric bulb. The invention of the light bulb was a process that took nearly a century, and it didn't begin with Edison. Long before Edison was born, inventors had been trying to perfect electric light. The first semi-successful attempt was made in 1807, when British chemist Humphrey Davy used a primitive battery to make an arc of light between two charcoal sticks. There was light, but it was too bright to be used at home. However, it was perfect as a street light. Dozens of light bulb designs were followed by investors like Warren de la Rue, whose platinum filament was too expensive. After him came William State, whose batteries were too expensive, and then Joseph Swan, who made a light too inefficient. After them came Edison. He purchased some of his predecessors' patents, learned from their mistakes, and invented a light bulb that only worked for short periods in 1879. So how did he happen to get all the credit? In 1880, Edison discovered the right material for his light bulb's filament, carbonized bamboo fiber, which burned longer than any other material yet tested. He made another bulb, but still wasn't perfect. But he had the reputation and financial backing to see it through. 2 years later, the first permanent commercial central power system became operative in Lower Manhattan. Hotels became lit, even theaters and storefronts flourished, and so Edison was praised as the greatest inventor of all time. Number 4, July 4th is not America's independence. Since you were born, you have known July 4th to be America's Independence Day as well as other Americans. This might be shocking, but July 4th is not America's independence. All the honor should go to July 2, 1776. It was the day the Second Continental Congress approved a resolution declaring independence from Britain, and it also doubles as the day that then future President John Adams wrote would be celebrated by succeeding generations as the Great Anniversary Festival. So how come July 4th stole the glory? The answer is simple: paperwork. According to Philip Meade, chief historian at the Museum of the American Revolution, it took 2 days for the Continental Congress to approve the final version of what was essentially a press release. It took that long to explain why the delegates made the choice they made. Therefore, the Declaration of Independence arrived at the printer on July 4, 1776, which is why that date appears at the top. And ever since, America has celebrated its Independence Day on July 4th. Do you think we should seek justice for July 2nd? Number 3. A pig was once sentenced to death in France. This must sound like the biggest joke you've heard this year, but it is no joke. On December 14, 1957, a sow and her 6 piglets were arrested in Savigny for taking the life of a 5-year-old boy. The sow and her piglets, together with their owner, Jehan Bailey, were dragged off to jail, and a month later, they were put on trial before the local judge. In this case, 3 lawyers were present. 2 for the prosecution, and 1 for the pig's defense. You probably feel it is insane, but hey, a child's life was lost due to whatever the sow thought she was doing. After the accounts from 9 witnesses, the judge decided that while Bailey should have kept a much more careful eye on his animals, responsibility for the boy's murder lay squarely with the pigs. The witnesses mentioned the sow as the orchestrator of the evil act, and for that the judge solemnly sentenced her to death, stipulating that she should be hanged from a tree by her hind legs. However, the piglets were set free on the promise of good behavior as there was no evidence linking them to the offense. It's so sad. A child lost his life to an animal owner's carelessness, but a pig is just an animal without feelings. How do you think the case should have been handled? Number 2. Mary actually had a little lamb. We all love the popular nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb, as kids, and even now, we can't resist the urge to sing along whenever we hear it. But did you know that Mary actually has a little lamb? The nursery rhyme was first published in 1830, and it is based on an actual incident involving Mary Elizabeth Sawyer. Mary was born in 1806 on a farm in Sterling, Mass. In 1815, when Mary was 9 years old, while she was helping her father out with farm chores, they discovered a sickly newborn lamb in the sheep pen that had been abandoned by its mother. Mary begged her father to allow her to keep the animal, which he allowed. Although Mary's father never believed the lamb would survive, Mary managed to nurse the lamb back to life. And yes, the lamb indeed had a fleece as white as snow, and also followed Mary wherever she went. Sometime later, one day, the lamb began to follow Mary and her brother to school. And Mary didn't really send the lamb back home. At school, Mary secreted her pet under her desk and covered her with a blanket. But when Mary was called to the front of the class to recite her lessons, the lamb popped out of its hiding place and, much to Mary's chagrin and the merriment of her classmates, came loping up the aisle after her. A school was no place for animals, so the lamb was shooed out, but it waited there until Mary was ready to take her home. That day, a student named John Rule Stone handed Mary a piece of paper with a poem he'd written. A poem that is still used today. Number 1. Beans were believed to contain the souls of the dead. What we know beans to contain is protein, iron, antioxidants, and fiber. But souls of the dead? Doesn't sound like the beans we know. But sadly, it's the same beans. Annoyingly, this belief is courtesy of the one that ruined our mathematics classes, Pythagoras. Apart from the fact that he was a Greek philosopher who founded his school of mathematics in Cortona, he was also a vegetarian. So naturally, we can understand why he avoided meat, but why beans? He believed that beans played a huge role in spirituality. They were linked by a very famous philosophical belief, metempsychosis. This belief focuses on the transmigration of the soul, and especially on life after death. You still can't find the connection, right? That's because Pythagoras believed that beans had the potential for life and death since they are shaped like human genitalia or fetuses. Weird, right? The weirdest is his belief that consuming beans led to gastric problems that often made people fart. But how is farting a problem? Before we start this discussion, are you for Pythagoras or against him on this?
At the end of the season, cut the plants off at the base.
Let's meet in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.